Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Billy Galligan, and today we are stepping into a proper time machine. Picture this. It is June 1978. I am sitting in a small, quiet pub in Shannonbridge, Ireland, right next to my dad. The weather outside is doing whatever gray, damp thing Irish summer weather does, but inside our eyes are locked on a tiny, flickering television screen. Through the static, we are looking at a completely different universe. It's Buenos Aires. The stadium isn't just full, it's bouncing. It is practically vibrating. There is a literal blizzard of white confetti and ticker tape raining down from the stands, completely covering the grass before a ball is even kicked. And then, you see the players, the tight jerseys, the classic black and white Telstar ball, and one man flying down the wing with a rock star haircut that you just didn't see on the streets of County Offaly, Mario Kempes. To a kid watching in a pub with his dad, it didn't just feel like a football tournament, it felt like watching a transmission from Mars. That was the tournament where Argentina went all the way, winning their first ever World Cup by defeating the Netherlands 3-1 in a grueling extra-time final. The sheer, unadulterated color of it stayed with me. But 4 years later, in the summer of 1982, the world moved into high definition. The blinding Mediterranean sun, the vibrant orange stands of the Mestalla Stadium, and the iconic shimmering blue jerseys of Italy. I was a bit older, the world felt a little smaller, and the World Cup had expanded to 24 teams. Now, my own heart was wrapped up in what happened in Valencia on June 25th, 1982. The host nation, Spain, was playing Northern Ireland. On paper, Northern Ireland shouldn't have stood a chance. They were the smallest nation at the tournament, but they had a mix of legendary experience and youthful fearlessness. In goal, they had the great Pat Jennings, 41 years old, a mountain of a man who looked like he could catch a flying brick with one hand. And in midfield, they had a schoolboy from Belfast named Norman Whiteside, who had just broken Pelé's record as the youngest player to ever step onto a World Cup pitch. He was only 17, and he was playing with the maturity of a veteran. 2 minutes into the second half, the moment happens. Billy Hamilton uses his blistering pace to burn down the right flank, beats his man, and whips a fierce low cross into the box. Luis Arconada, the Spanish goalkeeper, comes out to intercept it, but he can only get a weak, despairing flap at the ball. It drops right into the path of Jerry Armstrong. Armstrong doesn't hesitate. He lashes it low, right through the legs of the recovering defenders and into the back of the net, 1-0 to Northern Ireland. But then the script gets complicated. In the 62nd minute, Mal Donaghy gets sent off. Northern Ireland is down to 10 men. There are 30 minutes left on the clock against the host nation in a stadium that is absolutely screaming for an equalizer. What followed was 30 minutes of pure, unadulterated grit, defensive football elevated to an art form. Pat Jennings stood like a wall, plucking crosses out of the humid night air. Every single green jersey on that pitch ran until their lungs burned. When the final whistle blew, 10 men had beaten the hosts on their own turf. It remains one of the greatest, most heroic upsets in the history of modern sports. But the ultimate victors of '82 were Italy, and their tournament was defined by the poetic, romantic resurrection of a striker who went from public enemy number one to the king of the world, Paolo Rossi. He had just returned from a 2-year ban following a massive betting scandal. He was rusty, he looked completely anonymous in the opening group games, and the Italian press was absolutely tearing him to shreds. They called him a ghost. Italy crawled into the second group stage without winning a single match, drawing all three. And their reward? A group with Argentina and the beautiful flowing Brazil side of Zico and Socrates. But on July 5th, in Barcelona, Paolo Rossi finally woke up. He scored a magnificent hat-trick to beat Brazil 3-2 in one of the greatest matches ever played. From that moment, he was unstoppable. He bagged 2 more against Poland in the semi-final. And in the final in Madrid against West Germany, he opened the scoring with a diving header. Italy went on to lift the trophy, winning 3-1, and Rossi walked away with the World Cup, the Golden Boot, and the adoration of a nation that had disowned him 2 weeks prior. Sure, why not? That's the beauty of the game. Now, if Spain in 1982 was the summer of high definition, then Mexico in 1986 was a footballing fever dream. It was a tournament played under a midday sun so brutal it felt like a physical weight, casting long, harsh, geometric shadows across the pitch of the Estadio Azteca. It was the summer the Mexican wave was born in the stands, rippling through crowds of over 100,000 people. But more than anything, Mexico '86 belongs to one man. We often talk about football as a team sport, but in 1986, a 25-year-old magician wearing the number 10 jersey for Argentina looked at the history books, tore them up, and decided he was going to win the World Cup completely by himself. Diego Armando Maradona. To understand the sheer magnitude of his genius, you only have to look at one match, June 22nd, the quarter-final against England. The atmosphere is boiling, with the political tension from the Falklands War just 4 years earlier hanging heavily over the pitch, and in a span of just 4 minutes in the second half, Diego Maradona showed the world the two sides of his soul, the monster and the magician. In the 51st minute, Maradona plays a pass and charges into the box. An English defender tries to clear it, but slices the ball high into the air, looping back toward his own goal. Maradona chases it. The English goalkeeper, Peter Shilton, comes flying off his line. Shilton is a giant with a clear height advantage, but Maradona leaps, reaches out his left fist, hidden perfectly right next to his head, and punches the ball over Shilton and into the net. The English players are furious, but the referee misses it. Maradona runs away, screaming for his teammates to come celebrate so the ref won't get suspicious. Later, he'd call it the hand of God. It was pure, cynical street theft. But if the world was still cursing him for cheating, 4 minutes later, they were forced to worship him, the 55th minute. Maradona receives the ball inside his own half, surrounded by England players. With a swift, oiled pirouette, he leaves two of them for dead. Then, he starts to run. He accelerates into the blinding Mexican sun, the ball glued to his left foot. He drives across the halfway line, skips past Peter Reid, and leaves Terry Butcher on his backside. He gets into the penalty area, dances around Terry Fenwick, and leaves Peter Shilton sprawling on the grass before sliding the ball into the empty net. 60 yards, 10 seconds, 11 touches, 5 English defenders completely dismantled. It was voted the goal of the century, and it is pure, unadulterated genius. People forget that the 1986 Argentina squad wasn't a collection of superstars. Without Maradona, they were ordinary. He made them extraordinary. In the final against West Germany in Mexico City, the Germans knew the secret. They put Lothar Matthäus on him, man-marking him like glue, kicking him, shadowing his every breath. Argentina went up 2-0, but the resilient Germans fought back to make it 2-2 with just minutes on the clock. The momentum was entirely with Germany. And then, in the 84th minute, with his legs burning from the altitude, the genius strikes one last time. Maradona is surrounded in the center circle. He gets a bouncing ball, and without even looking, he plays a perfectly weighted, first-time, half-volley pass right through a tiny gap in the German defense. It lands perfectly into the path of Jorge Burruchaga, who sprints clear and slides it home. 3-2, the whistle blows, and Argentina are world champions, with Maradona hoisted onto the shoulders of the crowd, holding the golden trophy high into the Mexico City sky. Ah, Italia 90. Italy in the summer of 1990 wasn't just a football tournament, it was an opera. Everything about it felt grand, dramatic, and deeply emotional, defined by the haunting melody of Pavarotti's Nessun Dorma, echoing through majestic, newly renovated stadiums. For me, and for millions of people across Ireland, 1990 was the summer the world stopped spinning. It was the year the Republic of Ireland qualified for their very first World Cup under Big Jack Charlton. We played a brutal, uncompromising, direct style of football, and we didn't actually win a single game in normal time during the entire group stage, 3 draws against England, Egypt, and the Netherlands, but it was enough to creep into the knockout rounds. Then came Genoa, June 25th, the round of 16 against Romania. 120 minutes of tense, grueling, scoreless football. It goes to penalties. Now imagine the scene far away from Genoa, inside a packed, stifling pub in Inchicore, Dublin. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, the heavy scent of spilled Guinness, and a nervous, suffocating tension. The entire room is locked onto a wooden-framed television bracketed to the wall. 4 penalties each, 4 goals each. Daniel Timofti steps up for Romania. The pub in Inchicore goes deathly quiet. Timofti runs up, and Paki Bonner throws his massive frame to the right, full length, diving across the turf to block it with his palms. The pub absolutely erupts, but then a collective, terrified whisper ripples through the room because it's not over. Up steps David O'Leary, a man who had been cast out into the international wilderness by Jack for years, now handed the weight of an entire nation. He places the ball. He looks so lonely standing there. George Hamilton on the RTE broadcast utters the words that are now carved into Irish history. The nation holds its breath. O'Leary runs up. He strikes it right into the back of the net. Total strangers are hugging each other. Grown men are crying into their pints, and beer is flying through the air. Ireland is into the quarterfinals of the World Cup. But every opera needs its tragic hero, and our fairy tale marched on to Rome to face the host nation, Italy. They had a man who had come from absolute obscurity to become the face of the tournament, Salvatore Totò Schillaci. He wasn't even supposed to start the tournament, but he came alive, scoring goals for fun with those wild, frantic, passionate eyes. And in the 38th minute at the Stadio Olimpico, a long-range shot is spilled, and there is Schillaci, pouncing like a ghost to slide it home. Ireland lost 1-0. The dream was over. Hearts were broken, but the collective joy of that summer stayed with us forever. As for the tournament itself, it ended in Rome with West Germany getting their sweet revenge on Argentina, winning a gritty, ill-tempered final 1-0 thanks to an 85th minute Andreas Brehme penalty, crowning West Germany as the champions. In the summer of 1994, the World Cup stepped directly into a Hollywood production in the United States. USA 94 was a tournament of massive scale, played in giant sun-baked NFL stadiums. But the footballing gods had a very specific, almost poetic sense of irony that year, because the tournament literally began and ended on the exact same patch of white chalk. It started with a pop superstar, Diana Ross, performing at the opening ceremony in Chicago. Part of the show was that she was supposed to run up and kick a soccer ball from 6 yards out into an open giant net, which was rigged to split in half as a special effect. She ran up, full of energy, and pushed it completely wide of the left post. It wasn't even close. But the special effects crew triggered the explosion anyway, and the goal frame collapsed and split in half while the ball was halfway to the corner flag. And then, the tournament ended on the exact same spot in the suffocating heat of the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. After 120 minutes of scoreless football, the final between Brazil and Italy came down to a penalty shootout. The first time in history a World Cup final was decided this way. It all came down to Roberto Baggio, the divine ponytail, who had single-handedly carried Italy to the final. He had to score to keep Italy alive. He stepped up, took his run-up, and blasted it high over the crossbar into the bright blue California sky. Baggio just stood there, hands on his hips, head bowed completely down toward the white chalk line, looking like the loneliest man on the face of the earth as Brazil claimed their fourth World Cup title, winning the shootout 3-2. But right in the middle of that American summer was June 18th, Giant Stadium in the Meadowlands, New Jersey, the Republic of Ireland versus Italy. The heat that day was punishing, nearly 100 degrees on the pitch. But the stands were a literal sea of green. Over 70,000 fans turned Giant Stadium into a home game in Dublin. Just 11 minutes in, the stadium completely shattered. An Italian defender tried to clear a high bouncing ball with a weak header, and it dropped straight to Ray Houghton about 25 yards out. He took one touch with his thigh, looked up, and looped a magnificent high, dipping half volley with his left foot. Gianluca Pagliuca, the Italian keeper, scrambled back, stretched but couldn't touch it. The ball sailed over his head and dropped cleanly into the far corner of the net. 1-0 to Ireland. Ray Houghton went running toward the sideline and did his iconic, clumsy celebratory cartwheel on the grass. What followed for the next 80 minutes was a masterclass in tactical stubbornness. Paul McGrath, playing with bad knees, a battered body, and pure Irish iron, put on arguably the greatest individual defensive performance in World Cup history. He blocked everything, tackled Roberto Baggio, and stood like a colossus in the New Jersey heat. When the final whistle blew, Ireland had beaten the mighty Italy 1-0. The revenge for Italia 90 was complete, and the party in the Giant Stadium parking lot lasted long into the American night. As the 20th century prepared to take its final bow, France 98 arrived like one massive, vibrant, summer-long street party. The host nation was carrying an almost unbearable weight, fractured along social and political lines. They needed something miraculous to unite them, and they got it with the Black Blanc Beur, the multi-ethnic, unstoppable rainbow team. Their defense was made of solid, unyielding iron, conceding only 2 goals in the entire tournament. And in the final at the Stade de France, they came up against the reigning champions, Brazil. But the final was surrounded by absolute madness in the Brazil camp. Ronaldo, the undisputed best player in the world, was mysteriously left off the official starting lineup sheet just 75 minutes before kickoff, sending the press room into absolute chaos. He had suffered a severe convulsive fit in his hotel room after lunch. He was cleared by doctors, arrived late, and insisted on playing, but on the pitch, he was a ghost. Meanwhile, the night belonged to Zinedine Zidane, a son of Algerian immigrants from Marseille. He rose above the defense to power 2 historic headers into the net from corner kicks, leading France to a glorious 3-0 victory to win their first ever World Cup. 1 million people packed the Champs-Élysées that night, with Zidane's face projected onto the Arc de Triomphe. 4 years later, in 2002, the tournament traveled to South Korea and Japan. For Ronaldo, it was the ultimate redemption. Sporting a bizarre, triangular haircut, he scored 8 goals, including both goals in the final, as Brazil defeated Germany 2-0 to lift the trophy. But for me, the summer of 2002 was a completely different beast. Because of the time zones in Asia, the matches were kicking off at 6, 8, or 10 in the morning. If you wanted to watch, you were waking up in the pitch black, bleary-eyed, watching the screen in the quiet dawn. And the truth is, this is where the memory of the tactics and the fine details begins to fade, because life had caught up with me. The days of sitting in a quiet pub in Shannon Bridge with my dad, or locking myself inside a packed room in Inchicore with a pint in my hand, were gone. My main memory of the 2002 matches isn't the tactical formations, it's trying to watch a penalty shootout while holding a crying baby, or negotiating with a toddler to eat their breakfast while Robbie Keane scored a dramatic dying seconds equalizer against Germany on the screen. The World Cup hadn't lost its magic, it's just that the magic inside my own 4 walls had finally overtaken the magic on the screen. As the years roll on, you realize the greatest gift of this tournament isn't the stats. It's a global clock that ticks every 4 years, measuring who you were with, and how far you've traveled since the last time the world gathered around a ball. It passed from my dad to me in a quiet Irish pub, and finally to the beautiful, noisy chaos of my own children in America. The game always finds a way to keep us moving. Until the next kickoff, keep your eyes on the ball.